What's up, guys? So today on the podcast, we have Robin Black with us. Robin Black's, he's really well known as a fight commentator, and you may have seen some of his stuff on Instagram, the 1-minute breakdowns where he breaks down fights, sometimes related to MMA. Recently, he did one that I thought was hilarious of a Black Friday shopping mishap. But anyway, we had Robin on the show last year, and so it's been about a year since then. And so we have him on this episode. And this one's really cool. Like, we definitely talk about fighting and everything else, but you can listen to this and you can take it as what you will. But for me, when I was on this podcast with him, there were so many lessons that you could maybe take away for someone that's maybe trying to carve out their own path, do something a little bit different, and stray from the norms of whatever it is that you do. It doesn't have to be fighting. It doesn't have to be jiu-jitsu related. It can be really anything. So there was some really interesting stuff, and it's from talking with him. I think he's in a cool place in his life right now where he's starting to sort of break through different barriers and expand in different ways that are unique to him. So I hope you guys enjoy the podcast. As always, if you want to support the podcast, check out our Patreon, patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. Along with some podcast extras, we also put up some videos, and we put up, we just release a lot of different content there. Some of the stuff that you guys might be interested in are the podcast extras where we typically ask a question to the guests that are on, and we post it up there. There are also some cool stretching and like cool down videos. Eugene and I recorded a stretching and cool down series because we got a lot of questions from the people in the Patreon, so we did that. So this way, if you're curious about some of the ways that I personally stretch to sort of loosen up my muscles after training, you can check that out. And then also, if you guys want to support the podcast and you want to check out some CBD, you can use the promo code Chewjitsu, just Jiu-Jitsu, and save 15% off on Charlotte's Web. So if you go to charlottesweb.com, you put in Jiu-Jitsu, you can do that. And again, as I always say on every episode, just because I don't want to seem like I'm some like shill for some company, like, oh, you got to buy this one because whatever. I mean, there's a lot of good CBD out there. Just make sure that if you do get some from a reputable company that's been tested. This way, you know you're getting good stuff because it's unregulated. So you could be getting like weird stuff in your gas station CBD that's not going to be helpful to you. You know, you want to make sure you're getting the good stuff. For me, I know Eugene, he likes the raspberry gummies. I'm a big fan of the ginger turmeric recovery gummies along with the tincture. They're really helpful to my sleep and my training and my recovery, especially right now I'm getting ready for a competition, so I've been doubling my dose up a little bit to get some good sleep. So anyway, with all that said, guys, let's get started with the podcast and talk to Robin.
How you guys doing?
Good, man. It's been a while. It was January we talked to you last time.
No way.
Yeah.
For real?
Yeah.
Fuck.
Time flies.
Episode
That can't be possible.
Episode 29. I just looked at that because I was like, when's the last time we talked to Robin? It was episode 29. It was like January 3rd. It was a little before that. Probably December, like really late December, like right before the end of the year, like right before the new year.
That doesn't seem possible. Like, it feels like if you told me it was 6 months back, I'd believe you.
Yeah.
But it's like almost a year. That's crazy. Time flies, man. Like,
especially
it's almost like we. Yeah, but I feel like we're experiencing time different. Maybe because of technology and stuff, or maybe just as you get older, that's what we do. I don't know.
My theory is on it is that as you get older, things become much more routine. Like there's less, like, you know, like when you're younger, everything's so new, everything's new. As you get older, everything like, you know, there's new things, but for the most part, there's much of it is routine and sort of automatic. And so it's easy to breeze through things, you know?
Yeah. I guess, you know, breakfast number 12,000 is kind of like breakfast number 10,312. Like,
right.
You know what I mean?
Especially if you're like me, if you eat, like, I eat the same thing every morning. And so it's like, you know, it's almost like as soon as I wake up, everything's on like autopilot. I'm doing all my normal stuff in the morning. It's all happening, just normal stuff.
Yeah, I know, it's weird. I can't believe it was a year ago. I feel like like I said it, I feel like it was, you know, but I guess so. Yeah. Like, July feels like weeks ago, and I know that was 5 months ago because there was a couple of key things that happened in July. So yeah, it's wild, just a wild deal. Where are you guys again?
Louisville, Kentucky.
Right. Yeah. Cool.
So we're
Very cool.
are you?
He's like, yeah, it's
I don't know
cool.
where
It's
that is.
Kentucky.
I've been to Louisville once and it was cool. I liked it, but I don't know, man. I like traveling. Like there's something about everyone's the same, but also a little different. You know,
Sure.
every place is the same. People are the same, but they all have these little things. You know, it's cool.
Yeah, it's like most people, when you boil it down to the core, everyone's kind of doing the same stuff, and they're
Yeah.
after the same level of like some sort of comfort. They're trying to find someone that they can kind of connect with, find a group of people they connect with, those sorts of things. The ways that they do that's change, in very.
Yeah. Yeah, and the tones and the flavors and stuff.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is there
How
anywhere
many?
you've been that's been really like? I'm just curious because you travel all over. Like,
Yeah,
is there,
Myanmar was really wild.
yeah.
And I'm going to Senegal in Africa next week.
What? What are you doing
Yeah.
there?
Commentary.
They're having
Yeah.
fights in Senegal.
Yeah. Aries Fighting Championship 1. Some
Huh.
commentating. Yeah. I've never been to the African continent ever.
Man.
And it's like on the coast. Like I looked it up and you just first thing often I'm like, what does it look like? So I put in the city's called Dakar, Senegal. And you
Yeah.
look and it's like on the ocean, right?
Wow.
So like there's elements of it that look like like an ocean town. I've never been to Barcelona, but I've been to places in Mexico and
Yeah.
I've been to Cuba. And when stuff's on the water, it takes in a certain look. So it's Africa, it's urban, but it's on the water. So it's going to be wild. Yeah, that's going to be crazy.
The only thing I know about Senegal, I remember, I don't know if you've ever seen it. Have you ever seen those videos of like those like Senegalese wrestlers? Like, it's some big,
Yeah.
intense dudes, man. Like, it
Yeah,
was
yeah.
some stuff.
Yeah, no, definitely. There's there's a million things you want to do, but I want to always take in a little bit of the real martial arts there. Like, what do people do? Wrestling is big there, but this sort of MMA interpretation of fighting is big everywhere now.
Yeah.
But it'll be a little different. And the guy who's kind of put this together, or is a big part of the show, his name is Fernand Lopez, and he coaches Francis Ngannou and a bunch of other young guys. And he's different. He speaks French, so he lives in France now, and he is trained with a bunch of European guys and a bunch of guys and girls from Africa. But his style is different, and so you see how he works, and then you might say, okay, well, this is what coaches are like, and this is what fighters are like in Africa. But that's not the case. That's just him. In fact, the way I was in Korea a couple of years ago studying the Korean zombie. I was in the gym and I was just kind of analyzing, brought in by somebody. And the way he taught was actually very similar to how Fernand taught. So suddenly you're like, okay, this isn't geographical at all. But so all of that is really interesting. I have a lot of weird sort of interpretations that I look at too. It's like, if you go to, do you guys have like, there's a Chinatown in Louisville? Is there a little Chinatown?
We've got like a
no?
Vietnamese place. Like, we've got like a part of the town
Okay.
that's like heavily like Vietnamese and that sort of thing.
Perfect. So that's not Vietnam. That is Vietnam, and concept or flavor or inspiration and people from Vietnam in 1961 or wherever that part of town the people came, and then it's on its own arm. It starts to evolve as a Vietnamese-based region of food and people and ideas that since whatever year, 1960 or 1952 or 1971, when it started to thrive, it goes off on its own journey. And it's inspired and colored by Louisville, and it's covered and it's flavored with your region. So it isn't. And same thing with, Koreatown in Toronto or Chinatown in whatever city or Little Portugal or wherever. It isn't Portugal. It is Portugal in a time that then grew differently, and people from there will go to Portugal, and from Portugal will go to there. And although the language is the same and the food began at the same places, it's forked off into its own thing. you know?
Yeah, that's kind of cool. That's
And so
almost thinking about
things,
the
yeah,
language, like because you were saying like
yep.
languages will do that. So you think of like Spanish and all these colonies, they spread, the Spanish language to all these colonies, but then these different regions develop their own sort of flavor. To steal your word from you, flavor of Spanish, where it's Spanish, but it's a little bit different because it's been sort of influenced by that region and those people growing in that region independently
Yep.
from the home country.
Yeah. So in Canada, there's a lot of French. It's the second language here. And in Quebec, in one area of Canada, it is, French is their first language. But people from France go to Canada and they hear French and they're like, that ain't French. Like the words are the same, but it's not spoken the same. It
Right.
sounds very old, a French version of Old English here. Like it's overly proper because it's got more and more slang in France, but over in Canada, it stayed more and more like original French. So it's just all that. I mean, shit, like martial arts, anything.
Yeah.
Everything does that. Food, you go and you get curry in London. It's not the same as curry in India.
Right.
Although there's stories that curry was created by the British when they were in India. And this is the story that the British were in India and they had spoiled meat that they had to eat and it tasted bad. So they just grabbed all the Indian flavors that they could and spices and they created curry. So they claim, right? Yeah. And then curry in India becomes a certain flavor and then it goes off to London and it changes, Spicy food in Middle America isn't as spicy as spicy food in Mexico. It's just all that kind of stuff. Yeah. I find that kind of thing fascinating, how like the organism of these things change and grow and have parallel paths somewhere in different parts of the world, Yeah,
well, it's even like the martial arts when you think about like even, for me, I'm really heavily into jiu-jitsu. If you go from coast to coast and train along the way, if you went to some of these like these areas that are really heavily entrenched in wrestling, that wrestling finds its way into the mat room for jiu-jitsu, and their jiu-jitsu style is a very heavy pressure, aggressive game. Yeah. Whereas, then you'll go some places where the wrestling's maybe not as prominent, and the guys they roll differently. It's not bad, or it's not better or worse. It's just different. Still effective stuff, but because of those influences from other places, it's not the same.
Yeah, I think I started doing jiu-jitsu around 2006, and I did it with the idea that I was going to fight MMA, and this was a whole world that I didn't understand, and that's why I started to train. And I remember training with a guy named Sam Zakula, who's he's a black belt. He's a really smart, like super creative black belt. And there was not even 100 black belts in Canada at that time. And I remember him showing something. It was like a DAR setup. And he's like, yeah, all the guys on the West Coast are playing this. And I was like, wow. Like, the idea and he was traveling a lot and he was, learning a lot and he was watching a lot. And I was like, shit. Like to be able to say, this is what guys in this certain area inspired by, this is how they do in jiu-jitsu, but in New York, they're playing it this way. That's 12 years ago now, but I remember that exact class and thinking, wow, that is, I thought it was, you do this and then this will work. You mean this whole thing is interpreted by different artists in different ways? I remember that moment completely thinking about it different,
That's cool. And, the internet's changed this because I remember like back in the day, I remember going to some seminars and it would be like they've brought this like hidden knowledge from Brazil and they're going to share it with us. This is the half guard, like this random stuff or daily Hiva guard. Whoa. Yeah. And then now if someone has a really cool technique, boom, it's on YouTube or it's on an instructional, whatever. And now you can learn it so you can share it. I think it's really made a big difference as far as like the sort of proliferation of the techniques where they like spread so much faster and they grow at a much faster rate than they used to.
What I always take now from things is what is the grand lesson of the system that we're seeing. So when I first started to train fight, I'd been training martial arts in some capacity all my life. But by about 2006, 2007, I wanted to start consuming what everybody that was fighting in a cage was doing. And I remember kind of noticing that, I was told never cross your arms when you do an armbar. In fact, I was told like you can't do an armbar if you cross you can't do an armbar if you cross your feet.
Right.
I was like, okay, you can't do an armbar if you cross your feet. And then one day somebody did one. And then the very next, like as they're trying to sort it out, they're like, well, you can't cross your feet when you do an arm bar, but sometimes you can do this. And then later on, of course, it's like, well, crossing your feet will provide this, not crossing will provide this. Then it was like, you cannot use it. Everyone used to open a guard with a can opener. But then people started getting arm barred. And they're like, don't use the can opener. Right. Why not? Because you'll get arm barred. And even in MMA, can opener didn't exist now for like 5 or 6 years. Not a single UFC fight you saw it. Then all of a sudden, George St. Pierre is fighting Carlos Condit. And Carlos Condit was a pretty heavy guard player. Yeah. And all of a sudden, George is doing the can opener. Why? Because Danaher and Faraz and whoever he was working with were like, if there's a problem, we don't just not do the thing. We just solve the problem. And quite simply, just stayed centered or whatever the answer, locked the hip out or locked the movement of the hip out with his thigh, whatever George did. The answer was, of course you can do can openers. Well, what about arm bars? Just don't get arm barred. Stop that. And so over time, what you see with all of this is all of these absolutes are not absolutes. Mm-hmm. They may be true right this minute, but mostly they're only true because we believe they're true. Mm-hmm. And I'm fascinated in that about martial arts right now, to the degree that truly the best thinkers think of very few things in absolutes. They think the more rules you have when you're young, the real masters you start to see they start to believe less and less of these rules and absolutes. Always do this. Mm-hmm. Never do this. You can't do this. Later you're like, wait a second, whatever those belief systems are to be exploited. If you don't think I can use a can opener because nobody ever uses it because of some old way of thinking about how it did or didn't work, I should be using that. That's exactly what I should be doing. If you believe that I have to keep my front foot on the outside when I fight a southpaw, if you really believe that, that's not true. That's a novice truth, right? If I'm southpaw and you're orthodox and we're fighting to put our front foot outside, why are we doing that? Because in theory, the guy with his front foot on the outside has a nice clean line for his rear weapons. So I'm going to put my front foot on the inside. When I do that, what are you going to do? You're going to go, shit, the straight right hand is there. You're going to throw the straight right hand. Mm-hmm. If I know what you're going to do, I'm ready to exploit you. If I know what you believe, I'm ready to exploit you. So the idea that you must keep your foot on the outside, on the front, if you believe that and I'm fighting you, I'm going to use that belief against you because it's not true at all. Mm-hmm. You don't have to do that. It's crazy. And so I'm interested in those big systemic things about fighting now. Like, you know, when I was really, really into studying from the guys who had been doing martial arts since the 90s. And the 90s isn't a long time, but in Canada, you know, in the 90s, there was maybe a dozen black belts, probably not even. And they, like blue belts would be training together and they'd hear about a purple belt, like a 12-hour drive away. And they would drive 12 hours to train 2 days with them to learn one technique. They would believe that thing could only be done that way for years until they learned other. And that ever-changing nature of it, I think, is more interesting than almost anything. But it's a tricky one to discuss because if you're talking to a guy with 2 years of martial arts, studying martial arts, he needs structures and rules. But later on in life, all those rules are where the gold is. Yeah. The rules, what you think they can and can't be done, that's where all the exploitation happens. You know, that to me, that's just it opens up like, you know, if we got to live to 200, we would never really, that evolution would never stop. We believe something could or couldn't be done. Somebody would exploit that belief. That'll go on forever.
Yeah, there's a quote that I love from Charlie Parker, and it goes something to the effect of master the instrument, master the music, and then forget all that shit and just play. You know, so in the beginning you need that structure because you gotta get the. When you master something, you like as you go through it, even though you're using that structure, it gives you absorb the lessons internally, and then at a certain point, it's your time to then break past all the rules and just start doing your own thing, and then, like you said, dissolve those rules, and then you start to experiment and play around with everything.
Yeah, I guess you just have to get to the point. It is such a wild process when you think about it. It's almost like you have to tell your kid about Santa Claus and you have to go into detail about him. And then one day Santa Claus not real. you know? And it's just like that. It's like you have to say, we got to do this, and you never do this, and you always do this, and you pull. And then all of a sudden, there was something that Eddie just did the other day, and I was in the process of, Eddie shared it, Eddie Bravo, and I was in the process of breaking it down, and it was a choke from the bottom, but I can't remember how it was set up. But I'm looking at it, and it was some kid who's an amateur fighter. I think his name is Cassius Clay _MMA. I'm on Instagram, and I remember that because obviously that's a pretty memorable name.
Sure.
And you look at he's only got his the picture of it, but he's underneath half guard, and he chokes the guy. I'll have to pull it up, and I'll try to find it and then pull it up, and I'll send the clip to you guys. Maybe we're not far from being able to just press a button here and pop the thing up and narrate it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, we're not even just in a podcast setting, hanging out with friends. We're not far from being able to just do that right here, because the technology changes so quickly. But yeah, I mean, that's just a kid going, somebody told you can't do that. Well, in his case, and this is where it gets interesting, is what if there is a way to learn to be that innovative and learn to take risks and learn to be that creative without ever having to build quite as concrete a structure.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, what if you could, you know?
How do you know when that would, like, you know, for example, Chewy, you've coached tons of people and you've watched so many fights, like, and you probably watched evolution of fighters as well. Like, is there a point where you can decide, like, go explore, or like when does that even, is there even a way to tell?
Yeah, it's tricky. Like, what I'm wondering is, could we be doing that from the beginning? So there was actually a really great documentary I watched on a plane, and it was about learning. Mm-hmm. And they had Wayne Gretzky, they had that brilliant wide receiver who played for the San Francisco 49ers.
Jerry Rice.
They had Jerry Rice, and a number of these guys. And what they all they talked about the systems now, about how kids are taught. Hockey came up with Gretzky, of course, and so on. And these systems are taught in such a way so that the mass of us can get, the average of everybody can be better. But what happens is you get less Wayne Gretzky's and Jerry Rice's because everybody's taught the same system. Everybody's created such a concrete structure that they called it, you know, free play or creative play or unstructured play. And they were saying, without that is why you actually don't have these freakish, ultra creative, you know, football players, hockey players. Maybe you do more in basketball. There's something in the nature of how basketball is maybe trained or played, or, you know, I think a lot of and this is right off the top of my head,
sure.
And this is a feeling, not something I've studied, but you get the feeling that some basketball is learned by kids that are 4 and 5 and 6 and 7, exploring and being creative and having that unstructured play. Yeah. And that then they learn systems. And then, so there's something in the nature of unstructured play. It's a fascinating documentary. I'll try to just search around on my phone while we're chatting. Mm-hmm. But there was an aspect of it when Wayne Gretzky was a little kid, but for many years, he would watch every hockey game, and he would do it over and over each time. He would draw that little loop with the lines in it and the goals. And then as the game played, he just followed it, drawing with his pencil. He would, wherever that puck was going throughout that hockey game, he's watching the game on TV, he's seeing the puck moving, and that little fucker would be drawing the path of the puck for years and years and years. None of that would be taught, right? That would be shaping, you know, the neurology of your brain. It would be carving pathways into your brain to literally see and experience the game in different ways than everybody else is being taught it. They're being taught to skate this way, play this way, run these drills. Everybody's structured. This kid did all of that in a state of play. But you know, that there's so many elements to anything. You try to do that in fighting, you still have to fight. And the nature of fighting is that much experimentation might result in a lot of damage to you in the process of getting better. Whereas playing hockey, skating around and shooting a puck, you may not be sustaining damage to your brain and your joints and stuff. So, but some of that is about play, I think. And my friend Sean Quinn, he has a gym in Regina, Saskatchewan, and he was talking about his structured program, and we were looking at it. I'm like, I think, when you're saying we're going to train wrestling and we're going to train, grappling with strikes and we're going to train cage work, I said, my opinion is we should have a certain amount of hours of literally unstructured play that we encourage these people to do. What that looks like is going to be partly written by them. Structure is great. That's where we get at. It's where we get the middle up high. But that, those giant breakthroughs and those innovators are often created outside of those structures.
Yeah. There's a cool it was a lecture series that I listened to that was talking about how we learn, and one section about was about motor learning, so movement patterns. And they were saying that when people learn, they learn, and this kind of goes to your point about the unstructured play. People are able to bridge new connections when they're in sort of it's kind of like this happy middle ground where it's not so intense that your brain is then closing off possible avenues, right? Because it's so focused. We can think of people brain farting because they're so like intense, whatever. But then at the same time, you have to be somewhat aroused. It can't be just like super relaxed, because then you don't have the intensity to make things happen. And so, I think it's, partly it has to do with that environment where you have to be like okay with messing up, and you can't be needy for winning at that time during training. I know that for me, like some of my best techniques that I'd sort of just figured out on my own that I didn't actually get from someone else that I figured out came from when I really didn't step on the mat with like, I've got to win or anything else. I'm just like, I'm going to screw around today and let's see what happens. A lot of times, even like sometimes I'll train with my students where like maybe they're either injured or they're just coming back from an injury. And so you don't want to go full speed with them, and we'll just screw around a little bit. And because you're in that sort of middle stage where you're moving, but you're not really going crazy intense, you're able to just play, and a lot of cool things come from it.
Yeah, I agree. And it is, it's not goal oriented, right? It's a weird thing sometimes when you get good at something. Like if you are always able to pass the guy's guard, go to, lock their arm in somewhere, try an attack, attack a Kimura, use it to mount them, then slide in and get a head and arm choke and put them, like you may do that forever. It's your goal oriented. My goal is to win. I know they're to win. You'll get better, and that's great. You'll get better and better and more nuanced at that. But when you have no goal, it's like, I don't have the goal to submit him. I don't have the goal to sweep him. I don't have any kind of, my goal is to play. My goal is to explore. My goal is to enjoy the unknown of it. That is a really cool thing. And there's also like, you realize when you do anything and you really say, this is what I'm going to do for 10 years or the rest of my life, or in a sport, as long as I can do it. That's a long time. It's supposed to be fun sometimes. It's supposed to be pleasant. You're going to get better. And it's a very interesting one when you see certain people. Like George St. Pierre is somebody, when you look at him up close, he is obsessed. He has to, if he finds a flaw, he won't leave the gym until he's done it. If he's got something he can't quite do, he won't leave the gym until he's done it better. But there's a joy in it. Like he's like a little kid. He just loves it. Like the idea of it, it's like he just relishes the idea that there's something that he can't do. I watched him do it. I watched him, when I was doing a documentary with him, and I would watch him find these things that he couldn't do, some athletic thing, but there was a joy in it. Like it wasn't like, oh, damn it. Like he just was like a little kid is the only way you can describe it. And those are the ones that just get better forever. They're not, and it's like goals are strange. We're taught to like have them and like chase them no matter what, and like hold on to them and never surrender. And the only way you could fail is die before you get there, or quit. And I'm never going to quit. But you realize that goals, like that's not what they're intended for. I think they're meant to like give you a direction. They're meant like as a compass, but like not as a destination, And so if you don't have a specific goal sometimes, but you have a direction, you can explore a lot more.
Yeah, I think that even that obsession, obsession with learning and obsession with like perfection sometimes can be difficult. But like you said, if you're obsessed maybe with the process of getting better or improving, or like you said, like George is obsessed with like I think it's the perspective you put on it, right? Somebody can be like, shit, I can't figure this out, and you just get frustrated and you do it. But otherwise, if you put a different spin on it, and I think you said, you free yourself up to play, you can maybe figure it out, maybe even in a different way.
Exactly. And maybe you don't even do it. Maybe in the process of trying to do it, you learn some other thing. You will learn some other thing, right? You're trying to solve a problem, or you're trying to let a problem guide you. You're still going to learn something different. But there's also the element sometimes that, wherever you're getting to with anything, that, and there's lots of metaphors, climbing a mountain, sometimes you have to go back down to like find the route to get back up. There's a million metaphors for it, but you start to see how true this is. Like if you're trying to get somewhere, and that somewhere is essentially better, learn more, become more skilled, you're in search of mastery or whatever the thing is, sometimes you'll have to get worse to actually break through a plateau. You must get worse. Like you must find stress. My job now, my main job is to just study martial arts and share what I find. That takes the form of making breakdowns where I analyze things. Sometimes it takes the form of talking about a fight or a series of fights, commentating. I'm commentating in this weekend in Windsor and next weekend in Africa. But to do it, so essentially I'm using language, right? I'm studying a thing, and the same way you guys study martial arts, but my point isn't, although I love to be able to physically learn it, and that is a part of me understanding and sharing what I find, what I'm trying to do is find language to enrich the experience for the viewer, or to teach something, or to make an aha moment. And language starts to become linear. You don't realize it as it's happening, but it forces a direction. And if you stay in that direction, you can get to a point where it doesn't go any further, or you get jammed somewhere. And so fighting is an art. We could be talking about painting or piano, but it's also a sport. And it is commentated and presented more so as a sport. If you look at any sport, baseball, for example, baseball is commentated not all that much different than it was 30 years ago and 40 years ago. And it became about more and more and more stats. That's where we are now. Baseball's about stats, about numbers, about percentages. Why is that? That's just where they got jammed down. They got stuck down this line of thinking. And as they walk down this thinking, now baseball is a stats-based thing. It's examined that way, it's talked about that way. The people who present it do it that way. The people who talk about it at the water cooler talk about hits and percentages and RBIs, whatever. It's just how they did it. And fighting, somewhere along the line, most of it was just emulating Joe Rogan. Let's face it. Joe did it new. He did. It all sounds like Joe. Joe did it new, and it was so new and it was so interesting. The way that, and Joe, from Joe's point of view of the joy of how much he loves it, how much he loves watching it, how much he how much he loves training, as he became a black belt and then a no-gi black belt and all that kind of stuff. His joy was heard in it. And so what you got was this martial arts fan with super creative language who spoke differently, said things like, this guy's no joke. And he would say it in such a way that all of a sudden it got locked in. Now you hear fans say, oh man, this guy's no joke. That's just a Roganism. It became the language. The secret language. And people would look, it became like a culture, like a language. And people would look at it originally in the early days and go, Joe's the best. Instead of thinking, and this is just natural, we don't necessarily stop and do these things. We're driven by motor or by mirror neurons, where we tend to imitate other humans. This is what we do. It's why we speak the same language, why we all eat with the same devices, everything. But people didn't stop and say, Joe Rogan's the best because he's authentic and different. Maybe I should be authentic and different. They said, Joe Rogan's the best, so I think I'll just be like that. And that's not the point. So now we get, that people believe that's the way to commentate. And fuck, you could do a lot worse than imitating Joe Rogan. Absolutely. He's a genius. He's funny. He's interesting. He's different. He explores ideas. Of course you could, but it's not authentic. When you hear, some fighter from another part of the world still using Roganisms, it's weird, right? But so although Joe is a mentor and a friend and I admire him greatly, a big part of my job somewhere 3, 4, 5 years ago was to purposefully like realize you don't have to use the words that some other person uses here, you know, and you don't have to think, because the words we use don't reflect our thinking. Our thinking reflects language. So people believe that we use words to describe ideas and thoughts that we have, but we actually form thoughts and ideas around the language we learned when we were children. And easy way to illustrate this is to say, right now, think of a concept, any concept in your mind that you have no words for. Go ahead. Right? Right? We learned a language based on those that came before us that taught us this language, and now we use that language to shape thoughts. So if you don't explore language, you cannot explore new ideas. You must be in constant, and I learned this through trying to really do my job better. You know, and I when I first started doing breakdowns, there was a guy named Jack Slack, who's really brilliant, and there was a guy named who called himself BJJ Scout, who I think still does some videos, and they did things in different ways, and I did my own way. And right from the beginning, I wanted to explore things, and so we didn't use things like managing range. We didn't talk, so I tried to explore ideas like that. Things that about the relationships of fighting, instead of just that's a kick, that's a punch, oh my God, but to keep coming up with different ways to relate and interface with what you're seeing, you must explore it using different language. Otherwise, what you get to is, when you watch fighting, if that hasn't been done, it could be 7 or 8 people, they will all call it the same. Now, in our minds, we think that because that is what's happening, but that's not what's happening. That is one tiny interpretation of what's happening, positioned through the language of sport, the presentation of the NFL or any other thing, and then Joe Rogan's creative language. And that's all it is. When you say, every typical thing that you will say when you commentate, the natural thing that comes into your mind is the same thing that the fans will say as they watch it. Oh my God, that was an amazing dismanagement. He really used low kicks. He used a lot of pressure to back that guy up. When he got him against the fence, he took him down, ground and pound. It was all over. Unbelievable. That language is one line of thinking. What's really happening is, what is happening in their mind? What's happening in the body? What's the history of this? Where did it come from? How could you change this? What does this feel like? Can they see? Can they hear? Can they breathe? What's going on in the red blood cells? What's going on in the nervous system? Any of that could be discussed at any time, but we don't, because we've been locked into only one way of doing it. And we think it's the way, but it's not the way, it's a way. But to break that, and I started to see that because I got trapped down these places where something would happen and a guy would be trying to fight to get a leg, and then he would push it off, and I would say, unbelievable takedown defense. I don't even believe the thinking of takedown defense really exists. At least it shouldn't. Under no circumstances should you have only a single goal when you're fighting. So if you're trying to take me down, if all I'm thinking is stop the takedown, stop the takedown, stop the takedown, I have closed off every other possibility, every other option in my mind. I might reverse you. I might maintain this position. I might moderately change it. I might see a chance to take you down. I might strike you. I might fatigue you. I might whisper something in your ear. Like, who knows what the fuck? I could do anything. But as soon as I say defend the takedown, I have made only a single objective, which is not the option. That's not how you're supposed to think in a creative environment. So if I say that, and then also you would notice a guy would push against the fence and you'd say, great takedown defense. I would still know in my mind, that guy wasn't trying to take that guy down. He was pushing him against the fence for any number of reasons, fatigue, looking for another opening, using it as a style of vertical jiu-jitsu. There's thousands. But what he wasn't trying to do was execute a takedown. He was at his upper body doing this. They separated. Why did I say great takedown defense? Because everybody that I heard, that I watched, as I watched thousands or dozens of fights a week, that's what was said. And my brain started thinking that's what you say.
Yeah.
And that's when I realized if I'm going to see this differently, I have to slowly, even ones that I love and admire, Rogan, Dan Hardy, I have to shut it out, or else I will be led in the same direction of thinking as they are. Nothing wrong with that direction, but it's a singular direction.
Mhm.
It's saying what's happening. I want to discuss why it's happening. I want to understand on deeper levels. I want to look sometimes, and you see these two bodies, and you just blur your vision, and you imagine that they're actually just two brains and a whole bunch of nerves. And you actually watch the way that they're moving. Those nervous systems, all those little nerves hooked onto those brains are manipulating each other. It's not, he saw this and then this happened. And then this is a push and a pull of two highly trained brains and the nervous systems attached to them that are interacting in a different way. They're not thinking. And I know it from experience. You're not thinking.
No.
You're not saying, I saw this, he might try that. You're flowing. So actually, a lot of the things we're saying are not true. He saw that thing, checked that kick, he sees that opening, not in the way we say it.
Right.
So if that's ever going to really be understood, I have to dispel that thinking. It's limiting. And then I have to explore new language, or else I can't get there. And if I try to do that, I'm going to get way shittier at my job for a year or years or a long time. And I did. I got way shittier at it. I wasn't, because I was uncertain. I knew what I didn't want to get trapped in saying and thinking, but I didn't know what to say and think. I didn't know what to explore. I didn't know what to study. All I knew was if I continue down this path, there's nowhere to go except for the language that's being used to describe things that are being described in a way that we now know isn't actually that accurate. And we're only doing it because of the limitations of time and television.
Yeah.
If I'm going to break out of that, I have to stop that. But now what do I do? And I got a lot shittier at my job for a couple of years. But now I'm starting to break through where some of these ideas are interesting. The audience is somewhat interested in some of these different ways of thinking and these different ways of looking at it. But it was hard. It was stressful. It was fucking stressful. I'm like, I don't do that now. So what do I do?
Yeah.
I don't know.
There was
There's
a really cool visual representation that Joseph Campbell he used in one of his books, and he was saying that when you come up to the forest, if there's already a path that's paved, that's someone else's path, and you're more than fine to go on that path for a while, but eventually you're going to have to create your own path, right? Exactly, because we're as humans, we model after people, we watch and we take it in. But eventually you got to kind of bushwhack your own trail. You got to start to dig into the forest on your own. And so to kind of go along with what you're saying, like at that point, that's when you're beginning to carving your new path, and everything slows down because you're going into new territory, and it's a lot more difficult than to go on the paved path because now you got to pave your own way. You got to create your own language and sort of codify your own ideas.
It's true. And it's tiring. It's painful. You might fail. You might get stuck somewhere for a long time. You might start carving a path and it's wrong, and you have to come all the way back and go down start a different path. That's the hard path. But it depends what you're after. There's nothing wrong with following that path, right? Especially if this isn't your singular purpose in life. You've got a family. Let's say you've got two businesses. You've got 3 kids, you've got 2 different interests. That path is going to be really good. Go down that path and change a few things. But if part of your reason to live is to create that new path, and this is your purpose, then you don't want to take that path. You'll get trapped down it. You'll be the same. But it is easier for sure. It's the harder way. And the other thing is making your own path. There's no guarantee you'll get anywhere. Also, everybody might hate your path, or it sucks, or you get injured on it, or you get, you can't find your way through. And that's the scary part. But I heard this other line of thinking, that the palette of being, or the palette of everything. I've heard it said different ways, but if we, a palette is like a painting thing. We got all the colors on it, right? Mm-hmm. You can take anything on that and work with it. But the real goal sometimes is to create new things on the palette, not just to take what's already there and paint with it, but to create new things on the palette. And this is always done. This is what humans do. And this is what we've always done. And it is the key to creating anything. And there was I saw this on a TED Talk, and I believe it was a guy who was sort of started out by complaining about how hard it was to be a professor at university at only 15 years old. Because like he was this brilliant guy, that he was like a university professor by the time he was 15, how difficult that was. And I'm sure it would be, right? But he was discussing that if you play piano right now and we map your brain, we will see in the mapping of your brain all of this colored movements as your brain is, the waves of your brain are working. And as you play that piano, that piece of art of watching your brain, that wouldn't have existed without all of the people that created different aspects of that machine to scan your brain, and all of the mechanical design and the engineering and all the things that have, each of those people created a new palette. Then the language of piano, the piano itself didn't even exist in the 1700s. Someone had to invent the piano. When you invented the piano, that was all of the people who had done all of this creative work, all of this engineering to create the piano, that then used that instrument, that then learned a new language on that instrument, that somebody then scanned your brain. Each of those people created new aspects of the palette of being. They didn't just take what was already there. Now, when we do it, that's all there. But what if we can create something new? And if that's something, and for us, it may just be an idea. Yeah. But that's what we can do. And that's a reason to get up in the morning.
Well, and we going back to what you were saying about, even going on your own path, certain things might come about that you don't intend. The MRI that they use to, like watch the brain, right? The MRI came about as a byproduct. They didn't intend to make it. It was something that came about as an accident of creating space equipment in the space race. So again, they were going out for something else, and then they found a product that then they could use. And now you've got an MRI machine. It's a thing that scans our brain, scans our soft tissue to see if we need to have an ACL replacement or whatever.
Yeah. Think of that.
It's crazy. And so I actually want to ask you. Spill my water. I actually want to ask you, as far as like your process for learning, like maybe a new martial art or a new technique, like what do you do to like learn and make your own language out of that and share that in your own unique way?
So there's a number of things, but a big one, and I found this has been a big breakthrough in thinking and learning and being creative and expressing ideas, is the idea of negative capability. And it's really powerful. It's a powerful way to think. I found it's changed the way I've interacted with the world around me. And it is this idea that, so humans are very, very fragile creatures, right? Like we're sort of frightened and sensitive and insecure creatures. And we tend to need to explain the world around us. And that's what we're trying to do, But to do that, what we often do, and we see this everywhere, and it's been encouraged, this is the behavior of today, is we draw conclusions and jump, we form opinions and jump to conclusions, right? That's what we do, right? Like we see a thing and we think we know. And often the opinion and the conclusion will not be based on any work or study or personal experience. It'll be based on something we heard on TV or something the people around us believe, or and we'll say things like, well, it's obvious, or everybody knows that. Whenever you're saying it's really obvious or everybody knows that, you could be trapped in an idea that you don't even know where it came from. If it feels obvious to you, maybe that's the one to really search. So negative capability is the idea of staying in that feeling of uncertainty for as long as humanly possible. Not jumping to conclusions, not forming an opinion for as long as humanly possible. Because if you do that, and we will have a tendency to do, and this is an ongoing practice. You practice it like yoga, or you practice it like jiu-jitsu. It's an ongoing thing. I would see something, a guy slip his head and then threw a thing, and that I would draw a conclusion to that. I would form an opinion. This happened because this. Over the last year or so, I've started to resist that as for as long as possible. So what started to happen is, now what do I say? First of all, if I'm not jumping to a conclusion or forming an opinion, what will I say? Well, I'm just going to discuss whatever is the most information that I can possibly glean from it. So it forces you to find something. It's like, okay, what's happening here? What does that really mean? As soon as you stop thinking you know the answers to things, and in fact are certain, and this is the other way to look at it, in 10 years, we're pretty sure that we'll know more than we know today.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, there's a pretty good chance we may look at some of the things we're very sure about today and laugh at them.
Mm.
If you think of that every time you think you're sure about something, you end up with this feeling of uncertainty, and you embrace that uncertainty. And now it forces you to see different things. It forces you to look at things differently. Almost everything you're sure you know is probably wrong. In 200 more years of learning, it'll almost all be wrong. That means it is wrong. That means you shouldn't be so stuck to that idea. That means you don't know. Your opinion isn't super smart. And in most cases, like I said, most opinions people feel very strongly about are opinions they've heard repeated on CNN or Facebook or wherever they got it. They never really studied it. So that process for me is staying in, and somewhere reading about this, Einstein, when he finally put together the theory of relativity, he stayed in that feeling of uncertainty, intentionally stuck himself in that feeling of uncertainty for 10 fucking years until he finally came up with that theory of relativity. Because if he said, well, it's probably this, and that's okay. You can explore things. Maybe it's this. That is the hypothesis and the study of a hypothesis. Nothing wrong with that. But if you can end up so far down a road, and yet you know you're missing information, because again, in 10 years, we'll have more information. That means we're missing some right now. So you stay in that feeling of uncertainty for as long as humanly possible. And when I've talked about this with a couple of people before, and people tend to get this idea like, what are you saying? I'm not allowed to have an opinion? Of course, you're allowed to have an opinion, but your opinion may be trapping you and preventing you from thinking more. And that to me was one of the biggest breakthroughs, is sort of denouncing everything you're sure of for no reason other than knowing that in 100 years you'll know more. And that allows you to think further. And then you start to look at things and everything and the other thing, I think, once I really was at the point that, wait a second, what's the root of my job? Or what's the root of my goal? Or what am I trying to do? Or what am I after here? The root is to study martial arts, find fascinating things. I think the secrets to the universe are in the fucking sacred moments of fighting. I think they're all in there, right? Find these things and share them with people. My job isn't to do what commentators do. My job, that's just how people got stuck in this role. My job is just to study and learn and share. And once I kind of re-explored it that way, it became a different job. And then I started to, I'll look at anything, and this is another part of my typical process. I'll be watching something, and as you start to open up your mind to things, you see certain things that are either question marks or something really interesting that's happening. Or you look at it long enough, and you keep understanding that you're not right. You keep understanding that you're not right. And then you're forced to look deeper. So for example, once you realize that this is all happening so fast and you experience it yourself, that you realize that the thinking isn't the way we're talking about it, then you're like, well, what is this thinking? How are we performing when we are fighting or doing any complex thing? Okay, in its micro dose, it is a fastball hitter. So you study a fastball hitter. What's he doing? Why is he doing it this way? What's happening when he sees it? How does it change his perspective? How does he train to see something that we can't see? Okay, so you study that. That's a few seconds, which leads you to something else about understanding focus. So you start reading and studying about focus. And then you get somewhere else and you realize that thinking is actually, then you go to algorithms. What's an algorithm? An algorithm is just if this, then this. Mm-hmm. Well, that's what we're doing. It's algorithmic thinking. When you guys are doing jiu-jitsu at a high level, you're not this to this to this, and you're thinking about it. You've programmed your brain to perform algorithms. So how did you do that? And what's actually happening in your brain? Can we describe this in better ways by understanding what that really is? And again, it's like, if I watch you guys do jiu-jitsu, if typically we'd say, well, he sees this, then he did that, now he's trying this, he preventing him. But really, it's a flow. It's an interaction between two trained brains. Can we describe that different? What does that really look like? Then how do we learn things? I was just looking, literally, I'm playing with a breakdown today. I'm stewing on it for weeks, and it's really simply Muhammad Ali, making somebody miss and hitting them. And I'm like, okay, if we saw this 5 years ago, I would say beautiful counterpunching, right? And that's what you say on TV. Yeah, oh, and beautiful counterpunching, a big right hand. And again, that's not a criticism. That's been taught. That's been trained. We've been ritualistically programmed to say, big right hand, nice counterpunching. Okay, is there something else happening here? And as I looked at it, it was like your punch comes and I move and then I hit you. So on the surface, my action happened after your action. But when we really watch it, and you watch it over and over, and it's not hard to watch Muhammad Ali counterpunch over and over because it's fucking beautiful, right? It's an incredible thing. Like, it's really wild. So you keep watching it over and over, and you're like, wait a second. Muhammad Ali is not counterpunching you after you punch. The punch lands after your punch is thrown, but the behavior is simultaneous. Because how did he learn to do this? Well, how do you guys learn to do things? You chunk things. You chunk things. Mm-hmm. When you're a kid, you learn to do a kimura. But as you get better, it's a kimura to a guillotine, to a sweep, to a movement, to a subtle thing. That chunking of information happens. Muhammad Ali's chunk is this. So, and you start to look, and over time, your vision, so my vision's becoming trained to see differently. I see things differently than I used to. And for somebody who loves it, it's like, it's a wonderful gift to be able to like connect to it in different ways. But I can now, because I worked with Dr. Stu McGill. We talked about Stu, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, he's one of my ongoing guys over time. And sometimes it's been since I've talked to you guys last, which was a year, which is wild. So I haven't talked to Stu. I'll probably text him maybe tonight now. But you start spending some time with somebody at that level of expertise, and you learn, okay, this is when the nervous system behaved. This is when something happened in the nervous system. Wait a second. This sequence we're seeing Muhammad Ali do, we're calling it a counterpunch, beautiful counterpunch, a hard right hand. These are the things we say. What's really happening? It's a simultaneous execution of a chunk of information. Mm-hmm. But how the fuck do I explain that? Because I just explained it to you guys who are like black belts who've studied martial arts and physiology, human physiology. I now have to spend days and weeks to figure this out into such an analogy that I can explain it within a minute, so that somebody has a regular job and a regular life who thinks it's kind of neat and might learn a little piece of information can go, aha, motherfucker, that's cool. So that part of the job still has to happen, right? Mm-hmm. So that's somewhere in the process. But when you look at it, the great counterpuncher is performing simultaneously with the other guy. And then and that'll open up months of thinking about, wait a second, how is it that we're understanding this anyways? The fact that our eye sees you slip and you punch is what we see, but what's really happening? Wait a second, how much of this is layered on each other? And again, that goes back to, now you imagine it as just two brains and a whole bunch of nervous systems. This isn't just eyes. There's other senses going, proprioception, balance, distance, touch, feel. What's feel? 2 years from now, I'll have to be able to explain, when Anderson Silva does something, he just does it by feel. Well, we have to do a better job, because that's cool. But if I can study it long enough, I will be able to explain it in such a way that somebody watches it and they learn something really cool. They'll apply to cooking or whatever they do, and that's the process. And it's fucking fun, super fun.
It's just patterning. Like I think you're starting to develop these patterns in some ways. In some ways they're excellent and make you're more efficient. But then you get in some of these patterns and they can maybe slow you down and maybe constrict your thinking sometimes too. But that's how you get fast, right? You patterns. I was watching a video of you doing a breakdown on like an iPad or something while the fight, after the fight just happened. You were sitting in the crowd and doing a breakdown. And it was literally like, so fast. And a lot of that's by patterning.
It is, and it's wild, because what you're really studying is how excellent performers learn and perform. But in the study of that, your own learning and performance improves. Yeah. So I know what Michael Venom Page had to do to become able to play with space in such a way that he can sense that when your weight is down just enough, and he can never think about this, but his body is aware that somewhere in there, this amount of pressure of your foot compared to the speed at which he can jump in and get out is enough that you can't touch him and he can touch you. That he learned over time. I can see him doing that now, but the explaining of it is tricky. Mm-hmm. But as I watch him do it and I learn how he learned, now I'm learning my skill in the same way that he learned his skill. But I now, especially with Bellator, when they bring me in sometimes, they literally just say, what do you need? And I'm like, well, if you fly me to the show and you give me some money, if you're so inclined, and you put me by the cage and you put me in a hotel, I'll just do my stuff. And is there anything you want me to do? They're like, definitely, we don't want to tell you what to do. We want you to do your stuff that you enjoy and your audience likes. Like, it's really smart. But it's because smart. They're kind of, and they're just like, the stuff you're doing is good. If we went, and somebody who's got 27 other tasks is like, well, have you thought about this? Might be a good idea, but it also might be interruptive of the relationship you already have with your audience who really likes it. But while I'm there, I'll be watching this fight, and then that guy, one of their Chris, one of their digital team, will airdrop me the last fight. And while I'm watching this one, I will be building the breakdown so of ridiculous. This one. And it's weird sometimes, but you change your own brain. Yeah. Do you remember being a white belt? Mm-hmm. Do you remember being a white belt? Oh, yeah. I mean, compared to now, it's incredible how you changed your brain, right? And I'm just doing that connected to a really strange and specific and very specialized, weird collection of skills. And it's a strange one. It's like, I realize it, but they're all things I like language, studying different ideas, being creative, using my voice, the art of it, fighting, understanding martial arts, now editing and all of those things. It's just a strange thing. But, 2 years ago, I had never edited a video in my life. Never edited it. I had no idea how to do it. I just was out of a job and I needed to do it myself because when we used to have a staff of 3 or 4 people that would build and edit my stuff and shoot it, I just had to learn to do it or I wouldn't get to do what I like anymore. So I just had to learn. And now I'm pretty good at editing because you can learn anything. Right. But it is easier to learn it if it's meaningful to you.
And that's a big one. That's something I noticed, because we're talking about all these things and there's so much you could dive into with all these different ideas like chunking and the difference between, like you talked about fastball hitters, right? Like they say keep the eye on the ball. They're not doing that. Like they can't.
No.
But the fact that you're basically going back to your palette analogy, you're taking like the colors that you had and you're creating something new, and that new is fueled by a mission and purpose. And I think that just for me listening to it, and we talked before, that's something I think so few people, they're just not, I don't know if it's a lack of introspection or not, but they don't find out like what makes me tick. Not like what's going on in the news, not what the new thing is that Facebook's telling me, but what makes me tick internally and what do I believe and what do I, based on my personal experience, what do I value and what do I want to do? And I think that's kind of a beautiful thing listening to it, is you're creating these things and you're doing the way that you want to go, and the things that you want to do are fueled by, well, like this is the way that I want to do it, opposed to, well, this is what's popular or this is what I've been told to do or whatever. And it's fueled by that mission and purpose.
Thank you. And I feel like that. And I tend to, when I see somebody do something, like somebody cuts me off in traffic and swears and gives me the finger, somewhere in the last couple of years,
you guys do that in Canada?
Learned, not as much in Canada for sure, but there's a little bit of it. I still live in Toronto, and Toronto's still a bigger city, but there is less. Canadians are goofy friendly, like just like the reputation. And it's almost comical. Like if you ever see these on TV, like 2 people bump into each other and each one will say sorry like 2 or 3 times. Sorry, no, I'm sorry, man. No, that was me. Like over and over. It is weird. We're weird.
That's fantastic.
And I notice it more when I travel. Although now these other places, there are these cultures, like things we think are so. That everybody doesn't necessarily do. But yeah, somebody will cut me off, and I tend to now, and I feel really good about this, and maybe this isn't only good, but where my reaction might have been 2 years ago or 3 years ago, that guy's an asshole. Fuck that guy. My default reaction now will be like, that guy could have lost his mom today. That guy could just got fired. That guy could have got no sleep last night. That guy's scared of something. Like, because we're all like that. And we have this weird tendency to to if we do something wrong,
Mm-hmm.
our reaction to explain it will be outside the things that cause that behavior. I'm
rationalize
tired,
it.
I'm scared. It will rationalize our own behavior. But with somebody else, somebody will like do one bad tweet
Mm-hmm.
and will say, see, yeah, it gives you insight into what kind of piece of shit that guy really is.
Yeah.
It's like that's how we view ourselves versus others. Like a lot of us, the majority of our culture does that. I did something wrong. There's lots of factors that cause this. That isn't who I am. He did something wrong, finally shows his true colors. You know what I mean? That's just what we do. But why did I bring that up? Because when we talk about, I wish everybody loves something. Like everybody loves something, and they might be scared to say it. It's like, what are you really into? It's like, I'm obsessed with flowers. I love flowers.
Mm-hmm.
Well, fuck, today you could start a Instagram page, an Etsy store, and you could, drive Uber 4 hours a week, 4 hours a day, and run all your other stuff, and you could literally spend your life doing the shit you love. And so, but I don't judge that, because we do live in a world where the TV's trying to sell you things that make you less healthy, less happy, sleep worse, get in worse shape, have less nutrition. Then they're also like sending you messages that the world is scary, and like that shit. We have to. If you had influence on 5-year-olds that were family members, or you had the ability to influence a whole town of 5-year-olds, you'd want to teach them early. The world is not a bad place, but there are a lot of things, a lot of pitfalls you got to watch for that will actually alter your thinking, that'll get in the way of your path. Your path, which would have been to be a florist who designed flowers or studied flowers or talked about flowers or made things with flowers or did shit with flowers that we can't even fathom, because once upon a time there was no MRI, right? Whatever you were going to do, instead you could get derailed by CNN and Doritos and Bacardi and whatever. This shit's there, right? And I think that's a part of it. Like we have to be able to remember that, like, most people would love to be doing what they would love to be doing, and something in their path got in their way. And it's not necessarily their fault. It's not their fault they're where they are, but it is their responsibility to take some action if and when they're lucky enough to realize it. Mm-hmm. That's the part I believe, is if you look and you go, wait a second, there is a different world. What I am doing isn't what I have to be doing. I shouldn't blame anybody else. I should just get a little exercise today, or eat a little better today, or read something valuable today, or should I try meditation? Like, it is your responsibility. If you understand the world's a little dicey, it is your responsibility to look to make a small improvement every day.
Mm-hmm. Do you do any meditation? Just you brought it up. Like, is that something that you incorporate a lot? Do you feel like that helps you kind of, for us personally, I know Chewy does, and I do myself, like for stress or kind of, getting myself in a better state of mind. Like, do you feel like that's something that opens up your mind a little bit or helps you?
100%. And the answer to do I do meditation is, and this is something, even as I'm saying it, I realize how this goes against how I like to live. But sometimes I do, and sometimes I don't. And when I do, my life is simpler, it's smoother, it's more calm. And the typical reason that you don't is you're too busy.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's when you need it the most. That's when you need it the most. But let's say, and I use it like a meditation app sometimes to sleep too, which I really, really like. But yeah, 20 minutes, like I'll use Headspace and I'll use it for 20 minutes. And there are times where I meditate. I don't know if acute is the right word, but I'll be aggressive with it weirdly. But I guess it's not that weird. It's personality driven. Like, I'm a driven type. So I was auditioning actually for, I'll hear about it in the coming weeks, but I was auditioning to commentate Taekwondo, karate, and boxing at the Olympics.
Oh, nice.
Right? Which is fucking cool. Like, that's not even like, if you did it, a dream would come true. You wouldn't have dared dream of that, right? But it went really well. But in the 36 hours before, I probably meditated 4 or 5 times, where it was like I was using it like as a tool specifically. That week I prepared for 8 days, which is how I believe you should prepare for the important things, is really take your time and really connect to them and really make it feel natural. But in those days, I was meditating 1 to 2 times a day. And then in the 36 hours before, I did it a number of times. And each time it would calm me. It is powerful. There's no question about it. It's, especially today, like our brains move so quickly and it can get in the way of the things you want to accomplish. Sometimes it's good, but I feel like a lot of the times it isn't.
Yeah.
And you guys both do meditate?
Yeah, I do, not terribly consistently. Chewy, do you every morning, right?
When we were talking about it, like just like my breakfast doesn't change, my meditation ritual, I have to do it, because if I don't, you were talking about simpler, I'll get into these ruts where there's just so much stuff going on, right? Like, I will get off, like, lose control of the fact that, like, and I say this, but none of the shit matters. It's fine. Like if I don't get this one thing done, it's fine. It's not a big deal. We'll be all right. Like, it's not going to end the world. But so in the morning I'll typically start off with breakfast, coffee, read for about 30, 40 minutes, and then I meditate for about 20 to 30 minutes. And then I'll go about my day. And I have to do it. And if I do it, I feel great. If I don't, I just feel less like centered, I guess you'd say. Centered, I don't know what else to say. Basically, I feel like when I meditate, I'm able to, like you were talking about being in the car, I've noticed that, as I've done this stuff more and more, I've been able to be more of like aware and almost watch the stuff come up in me. So if I get angry, it's almost like I'm a little bit separated from it. Like, why am I angry? Like, why am I angry at this guy? I do the same shit that he does. Or there was one time when I was with my girlfriend and like I got angry about her for something. And I remember like asking myself as it's happening, as I feel the anger coming, like, why are you getting angry? Like, does this really matter in the grand scheme of things? Like, if you were getting ready to kick the bucket, would you be angry about this? And would you even care? I'm like, no, then fucking forget about it, But I have that mindset when I meditate. If I don't, I end up just being like, just normal asshole that gets all up in arms about silly shit.
I remember when, I think most people would agree. And I think what you're saying is what, at least in our early stage of learning about meditation and practicing meditation, somebody who does 45 minutes, an hour a day for 30 years, I'm sure they're reaching different levels.
Sure.
But in the early stages, that's what we're supposed to be able to gain from it. The ability to watch emotions and thoughts come and go and realize you are not your thoughts, not always.
Right.
Sometimes your thoughts are just these random things that come in, and understanding to craft a conscious thought and understanding that sometimes weird shit just pops into human brains. And I've heard it described this way, that literally at different points in the day, and this is mindfulness, which is practiced in tandem with meditation, the idea that you just sit with a notepad watching yourself. Oh, I scratched his nose. Okay. And you're not judging it. You're not mad at it. You're not reacting to it. Oh, scratch his nose. Oh, he seems upset about that. And literally look at like as if you were a scientist observing some chimps in the wild, and calmly watch yourself and do it, 5 and 10 minutes in chunks during the day. And that in tandem with meditation allows you to do that. I mean, we should be able to have some amount of control over our emotions, right? And we realize that we do. If you study martial arts and you do yoga, you do meditation, or you're on vacation, or like some of the stresses of the world are lifted, you realize you actually can have a lot of control over your emotions. Something happens, you're not automatically mad and then saying, well, I'm mad because you did that thing. It's like you develop that skill, and it's really important. A lot of people think that the emotion that comes up is just, well, now it's there. I mean, look what you did, and now it's there. And we're supposed to have control over that. If we don't, we're going to be on roller coasters and our behavior will be weird as a result of being emotional and stuff. So this is the point. This is ultimately the point. If all you did was yell at a guy or cut you off in the car, in the confines of your own car, it would be okay. But if you start reacting in different ways in relationships and at work and being emotional in business and all these kinds of things, it'll fuck up your life, right? It'll fuck up your life real quick. So you look at that and the ability to study yourself, regulate your thoughts, and regulate. And I remember when I actually started meditating, somebody that made a big difference in my life from the day I met him. His name is David Mullins, and I did mentality podcasts with him for a long time. He moved back to Ireland. We could still do it, obviously, now with Skype and stuff. We just haven't. But he is a sports psychology consultant, and a good one, and a real the interesting part is the best sports psych people, what they do seems really easy, right? Oh, well, let's talk about what you do, and let's be honest. More honesty, more honesty, more honesty. Okay, let's journal. What did you do this morning? What are you trying to do today? At the end of the day, what did you accomplish? Like, very simple. The best sports psychology consultants do a simple process of truthfulness, right? The weird ones are ones that get you, visualizing superpowers and, hypnotizing you into things that make you feel like everything's cool because I got hypnotized. But the hard way is we deal with reality. We deal with the truth of reality. How good are you? Is that going to be good enough to win this contest? It isn't. Then how do we improve that? Like, we're dealing with reality. But when I met him, I was working at a 24-hour combat sports channel, and I started getting these, and I think most people have this, and when they have it, it worries them until they realize this is somewhat quite normal, where you start to kind of narrate things that haven't happened yet. This is going to go wrong, and then my boss is going to get mad, and then this thing's going to happen, and then we're going to be in trouble. And you start writing that. And I was doing that over and over. I was making, 2 breakdowns a week, which was a lot of work at the time. And I was still learning, and I was training, and I think I was actually still looking at having a fight. And there was just a lot of things going on. And I was I was starting to understand being able to project how things change. I can anticipate that you'll see a lot more movement in fighting, and I can anticipate how the internet is going to affect our jobs. And I was in an environment where I thought, some of the executives and some of the decision makers had been around a lot longer and were 9 to 5 and weren't always looking. And I was like, some of the things that this company is doing is going to be in a lot of trouble. We could all lose our jobs. And I just kept thinking it. And I just kept writing the future, this stressful future. And I remember talking to him about it, and he's like, bro, you honestly need to meditate. And I was like, really? And he's like, for real. And I started doing it at that time, 10 minutes a day for some length of time, and then 20. And it really was the difference. That idea, you could look at yourself and go, wait a second, why are you doing that? Okay. How could you stop doing that? When are you doing that? How did you get caught? And within weeks, I stopped doing that. But I think most people do that. They imagine some terrible future or even some good one. They imagine, I'm going to get this, and then that's going to come through. We're going to buy this thing. It's going to be wonderful. And then they're let down these building of expectations that aren't real. And meditation allows you to not get trapped in those things.
Yeah. I don't know if you do much of it, but journaling's another thing where if I have a question, some negative thing that I'm like sort of stuck on, or anything like that, I have a journal. I open it up, and basically I'll just start asking myself questions and have this basically just open stream of communication with myself, and where I'm just writing. And, there's times where, you'll find, or at least I do, I'll find all sorts of things that were sort of, you kind of wall them off in your brain, or you don't really want to come to grips with them. And then, when you're in the process of doing it, like I'm sure as you do when you're doing a breakdown, all of a sudden you have this epiphany about something. You're like, oh my God. Yeah. It's the same thing. You have this epiphany about yourself because you're going through it, and then there it is in front of you to look at, and then it can be something sort of helpful getting to be introspective about what's making you tick, what's making you do things, and I find that to be useful as well.
I do too. My flaw with that I'm thinking as I'm hearing you say this is, mine are like, there are scraps of paper everywhere with writing. I have a pretty organized space, and we live in a kind of a clean environment. But my desk, my sort of couch area, and like I have for real like stacks of paper this high. And sometimes I'll bring them together and stack them, but I don't go back and review them very often. I think that would actually be very valuable, even weeks and months earlier. Oh yeah. There's a certain amount of what I like about keeping them. That's evidence. It's undeniable evidence. You look at that, and some of them are breakdowns. Some of them are time code ideas where I froze and rewinded things to collect all the kicks or all the movements. Back in the earlier days where I thought it was about the choices of technique more than about the individual. Now I know it's more about the individual. The tools are we can fixate on how a kick landed all we want, but that's not really what it's about. It's about the mind and the movement and the sort of the connection to moments. But I'll look at these, and that's undeniable evidence of the work that you did. That's the cool thing about having paper, is you look and there's stacks of it and you're like, oh shit, that's real. I did that.
Yeah.
And if ever, it's hard to check in. It's hard to compare yourself to I asked you guys to remember being white belts. You do remember being a white belt, but you don't really remember what it felt like to not know what you know now. If you did, you'd have so much more appreciation for what you know. Like you get normal. It normalizes to be as good at something as you are at something now. But really, the you who didn't know how to do it would be blown. Your mind would be blown by what you know now. And it's good to still take that in. You don't want to be arrogant, and you certainly don't want to be overconfident. But you do want to have, again, reality. You want to have the real notion of how much you've learned. It's really valuable.
Yeah, I still have them. I've kept a journal since I was a kid, like since I was like my late teens. So I've got like these white belt journals where I was writing down. I didn't get crazy into like say techniques that much, but I would write like emotions. I would be like, man, I went into the gym and this blue belt killed me and it frustrated me, blah blah blah. Or I was getting ready for a competition and I would write down all the injuries I had that I was going into with, or the first time I had a fight. I remember my first MMA fight. I was talking about how I couldn't sleep and all this stuff. And what I like about it is I can go back and even I have these all the way through up until now. I can look at them and be like, I've always been nervous before matches. I've always been this way. Like, or you can even see the thought process that you were going through, 5 years ago compared to now. To do the same task, and it's really interesting because, like you said, now you have this evidence. Because a lot of times, like you said, we normalize things, and we kind of forget what it was like. We a lot of times the past is a figment of our imagination. It changes because we change it, and it becomes different.
We rewrite
right?
it.
Yeah, exactly. And so, like when I can look at those pieces of paper, I'm like, well, this is from my heart. This is what I felt at that moment, And then you can just kind of have a conversation with yourself from the past.
And then you can ask yourself, not just what I was thinking, but why might I have been thinking that? Like if you looked at, for example, let's say all of the injuries you had, what am I trying to do here? Am I trying to give myself an out later?
Yeah.
Am I trying to overcome this? Was it some of all of those things? Because you got to do it without judgment. You were young and you didn't know what you know now. So why did I do that? Why did I think that was important to write? That's really neat. That's a really neat idea. Not just what you were doing, but now you can study what you were doing. And again, it's tricky because you have to theorize it because you still aren't you then.
Right.
You're a completely different human being in every way. Every cell of your body is different, but you're still at least, there's an echo of you there that you can study. That's really neat. Yeah, that's a really cool thing. I definitely, I want to go back and look through those things. It's because whatever changes you've already made also remind you how much, the idea that at 60, you could be way better, way smarter, way nicer, all of these things, that to be true because you can look at you at 18 and see how much you changed. So that's still possible in your future,
Yeah. I like that, I never really journaled, but when I first started journaling about jiu-jitsu, it was more technique oriented. It was never like emotions, so that's kind of interesting to me that a lot of what you wrote was like where you'd written was more about how you felt about certain things, and it just kind of shows, I think maybe you had a certain expectation or jiu-jitsu maybe meant something to you different than some other people because you explored on a different level, maybe on a deeper level. Like for me, I started jiu-jitsu as just something I wanted to do after kind of while I was finishing up college. It was never like, this is going to be the thing that kind of shapes part of my life. So I never really, when I wrote down things, it was more techniques. It was never really like emotions and feelings. Because I don't know if I was that invested in it initially.
Yeah, but that's interesting too. That maybe in the process of learning technique, of learning A, B, C, 1, 2, 3, eventually you got to do, re, mi. You know what I mean? Like eventually it became like you connected to it as an art or language or a music or whatever. That that's interesting that the path was different. But that circles us back to that idea of to me, like I'm thinking of needing that structure when you're young. Like you
Right,
learned
right.
jiu-jitsu as a series of techniques. And how else could you learn it? But yet I do start to see these people doing breaking rules and coloring outside the lines and it working. And but now we're talking about trying to study how things are taught and learned and how the brain explores, and we're getting outside of, are we able to do this? And to really learn, to really study this and really find real answers would be decades of our life, maybe. So it becomes kind of an aspect of thinking, something we're curious about, something that we're going to keep looking at and keep wondering about. And when you see some kid who's only been training something for 2 years, but they're brilliant, although I feel like we see a lot of that now, like you see on these TV shows about talent shows and stuff. There are 8-year-olds who can do hip hop dancing or whatever, better than 18-year-olds could 10 years ago. There are kids who can, play piano at 8, that play piano that you couldn't find an 18-year-old to do that. There's something in the process of how young everybody's learning things, and that's changing too. And understanding that is a whole other world. How and why that's happening, Is it the internet? Is it communication? Is it language? Is it we've learned how to learn better? Is it what they're seeing and being exposed to younger? Is it all of these things? Is it none of these things? We're learning, we're accelerating. It's going to be a wild thing. People who are 6 years old now, what are they going to be like when they're 18? Like, what will they be the same species as us as far as the way they think and behave?
Yeah, like the way we interact with our environment, now like everybody's got a cell phone, for example. We interact that cell phone to share ideas or receive ideas. So I think a lot of it's the proliferation of information. How much more is accessible? You get to pull from different things and create your own little stew, your own little blend. And then that that you get to pull from different areas. I like a little bit of this. I want a little bit of that. And then you kind of add a little bit of your own flavor, and then it turns into something new. Like nobody's recreating fighting, but people are doing different things. Like Anderson Silva did things that we were like saw in movies. We're like, wow, where did he get
and they'll
that?
be
Like,
different.
Yeah.
There will be more different and continued different, and but it's accelerating now.
Right.
It's moving faster, and even the volume of information that you can go through and how quickly you can get it. Like, do you ever listen to podcasts or books on double speed?
I listen to it 1.25 is what I usually listen to an audiobook.
Really? I never have.
I'm 1.5 now. I'm 1.5 now, but 1.5 is normal to me. And I wonder if I speak a lot faster because of that, or if I think faster, or you certainly can. In a way, when you listen to a book at 1.5, and you can work up to 2, it'll sound and you'll experience it just the same. It's just practice, and you start experiencing. Now you're downloading information into your brain, right? I mean, isn't that what we're doing? Somebody spent much of their lifetime studying something in depth. Depending what you read, you can read fiction, but if you read a lot of fiction really fast, maybe that'll alter your ability to imagine and to create. But if you're reading nonfiction, somebody studied much of their lifetime and then spent maybe years of their life making that. And in 2.5 hours, you fucking uploaded that shit right into your brain. Right? Like, that's pretty fucked up when you think about it. And
well, that's no different than what you're doing, because you're like saying, you're going through this process of continuously refining the language to explain complex ideas that relate to fighting and all this stuff, and then you give it to some guy where maybe this concept took you like 1.5 years to finally nail down that this is the easiest way to explain this really complex idea about proprioception, and then you give it to him and he's like, I get it. And like instantly, what took you 1.5 years, he got in 10 seconds.
Well, and then you do that in a lot faster way, and then you put it into you explain this massive amount of information a lot of times in 1 minute. So like we're getting like all this stuff, and we're getting it in a minute, and you're like condensing it in a way that's like digestible and understandable, and like boom, like, oh, I know what he was doing there, or I know why he moved, or whatever. That sequence of movements, we kind of You know, that's why I like enjoy watching those breakdowns, because I'm like, I never fought MMA, you know, so but I've always watched, you know, martial arts
Yeah.
and boxing and stuff, and just getting an idea on like, well, maybe why people move a certain way or do a certain thing, and then you put that in a small little snippet in a minute, and I understand it. That's kind of cool.
It is neat. It's a fun thing, man. It feels, it's not necessarily important, but it's meaningful. It
Sure.
means something. And I'm now at a point where I have a, you know, there are other objectives, just subtle ones, but like I want somebody to get more than just the thing. If they can see that we think, understand thinking more, for example, or understand movement more, or understand learning more. There are times, and you know, or even things like expectation. Like if I make you expect something and then I take advantage of that expectation in a fight, that's real life too. That expectation can harm me. I'm expecting a certain thing and I don't get it. I'm surprised. I'm unsettled. I don't get punched in the face, hopefully, but in the video they do. Or you know, just those types of philosophical ideas. Now, to me, that's what fighting is to me now. Fighting is sort of a microcosm of life. And so now that's one of my primary objectives is, and sometimes you can't do it. Sometimes it's just like, wow, was that ever cool? Canelo did this thing and they knocked that guy out. That's fucking cool. And this really one neat little detail happened. And if people see that, they're going to dig it. And sometimes that's cool. I mean, I make 500 of them a year. So if 300 of them have some philosophical piece of information that hopefully affects somebody's thinking, if they see 11 or 13 or 17 of them, that's super cool. And or if it, you know, I'm always trying to like get across the idea that with any type of practice, you can improve any skill. I mean, a lot of people don't even know that's true, or they hear it and they think it's true, but they never apply it to themselves.
Never felt it.
They've never felt it, or they just think that belongs to everybody else, but not them. But it does. All you have to do is practice something and you get better at it. And we know that to be true. You know, some things we do better and we learn better than others, and sometimes we learn to learn better. But I really do love doing them, and they keep breaking through into different ways of thinking, and ultimately you study anything long enough, and there should be things that make sense outside of the paradigm of what you're studying. And that's where I feel like I'm getting to now. By studying martial arts long enough, I've learned lessons about life and learning and philosophy and thinking and all of these things. And also, I'm hoping that at some point, you know, the incorrect ways that we view the world around us, because we all do, and probably humans always will, that somehow in there, you're hoping that people see slightly different ways to it. The language we use to describe politics and sports and life and food and all of these things is super limited, and it limits our understanding of the world that we're in. And so you're always trying to see that outside of just making somebody understand what happens when two left hooks connect, that somewhere in there, they also understand that the world isn't necessarily as it seems. It's the world around you is a beautifully complex thing, and you can make sense of it more than we do already.
I think from when you started to now, your breakdowns have a different purpose. There's a different purpose. It's not simply just on this baseline level of I'm breaking down a fight. It's like, how does this relate to a bigger picture, to like a, you know, how is it more meaningful to people? And I think that's a great thing with jiu-jitsu that I think Chewy, you and I have both seen, that like jiu-jitsu kind of can be an outlet, or it can be a brotherhood or a sisterhood or a family, and like it's like you do this thing where you're like choking each other, but really it's like you're building a relationship with somebody else, or you're kind of growing a family, and like maybe sometimes an enjoyment for life as well. And then it leads to other things. You know, it could lead to happiness and other aspects of life, or whatever, you know, or confidence, or, you know, we had a guy, one of our training partners, who came into the gym really overweight, and like just I think, was he the one that wouldn't come into the gym, Ben?
Yeah,
he wouldn't come to the gym for 6 months. He drove past the gym and wouldn't come in. Really overweight, and then he won an amateur title in 6 seconds a couple weekends ago.
Wow.
He's a jiu-jitsu guy, and he knocked some guy out in 6 seconds. It was incredible.
Amazing.
And,
Amazing.
you know, so it's just like, damn, how that changed him and how it changed so many other people you know, that have done jiu-jitsu as just martial arts in general.
Did that guy happen to tell you what was different on the day he did go in? Like why, you know, so think about that. Like he, you know, you'll appreciate him probably as a friend and as a student always. And it isn't just to use him as an only example, because almost everybody has some example of something that they had to overcome to do almost everything. But something in you, some people would drive by it once and then never think about it again. Some would do it twice, some would do it 6 times, some every time they went by, and some would just never go in. But then going in changed his whole life. And if you can just fucking bottle whatever that thing was, and it may be as simple as repetition. It may be as simple as just repetition, driving by it every few days, but something made that day different. And that's a really special thing. And he's just a regular guy. Mm-hmm. And now he's a guy who's doing really cool things that wasn't doing them before. Everybody's just a regular person. Everybody's capable of doing that thing. And later in his life, whatever he does, whether, you know, with a family, he does less jiu-jitsu and does some other thing, it'll open thousands of doors. And it's like your whole life is driving this way. And then one day you make this one decision and it changes everything. Mm-hmm. And that to me is fucking fascinating. And the thing is, again, it's like language is our limitation so often. He may tell you, but he's only telling you based on the language he has to do it. Right. Really, he doesn't know. He doesn't know why that day he went. But that's so cool to me. That is such, and you just wish that everybody could just do that thing. Like yeah. It doesn't have to be go to jiu-jitsu, but it's something that they're scared to do. But you do one thing you're scared to do, and now you've done one thing you're scared to do. And then you do 2. And now you're a guy who does scary things.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Now you're a fucking guy or a girl who does scary things. And then once you're a person who does scary things, and it doesn't have to be fucking like parachuting, it can be talking to somebody you were scared to talk to. But once you're a person, your life's different that day. Mm-hmm. You know, your life's different.
Yeah, you can use it as a springboard to other things, like basically.
Yeah.
Which is awesome.
You know? Amazing. It's fucking amazing. That's life.
Since I have you and you're an analyst and you do these things, I want to ask you a fight-related question. You did a breakdown, was that the Rolling Thunder KO? That one, I think.
Yeah, was that?
I think you did.
Yeah.
Ross Pearson, I think.
Within the last. Yeah, Ross got hit.
Yeah, that was crazy. Is there a knockout like that's very memorable to you that you've kind of just been blown, like that just stood out to you that you've done a breakdown on? Any knockouts? I know it's kind of fun. It's kind of a crazy question because you've done thousands of these, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Is there one that stands out?
So I was just looking to see if I can actually find it in my phone here, but even that, like, it's so many. It's probably like only 10 days ago I did that one. But what was neat about that one was he set it up with something, a spinning kick, and you saw Ross, as you froze it, you saw Ross kind of go to shield that spinning kick, that the body mechanics, you're trying to trick, off topic, but I heard a guy complain the other day that a guy was going to glove touch him, and then he took him down, and then he finished him, and he said, that guy tricked me. And it's like, fighting is trickery. Like everything in a fight is constant trickery. I mean, it was Sun Tzu, he said, all combat is based in deception. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's what it is. So doing a really cool Rolling Thunder kick is really neat, but you have to make him think that it's something else, or you have to make him think that something else is happening, or make him think it's time to hit you. You must manipulate his thinking to be able to do it. And Ross tracked it as a spinning hook kick, and you saw as he kind of went here to block it, and then it came over top and hit him, and that's really cool. But man, there's so many. Like there's Globe Feitosa. It's this, and
the Brazilian kick?
Yeah.
Yeah,
There's
man.
one that he did, and it's like you look at it. I like those ones sometimes where it's like you had to change your body, the way your body moves. You had to create different paths that it can move. So that one, and yeah, you know, I've got lots of friends who can throw the Brazilian kick, and everybody can throw it to some degree if they're a martial artist. But in his case, it's like the hip and he had built a new structure in his hip joint. That one's really neat. Things like that. There's an axe kick. I think it was kickboxing, not MMA, that a British guy did. His name's escaping me. I've broken it down a couple times. He fights in Bellator in Europe now, and full axe kick up and lands it. There was another, man, there's so many. There's in Russia, a guy throws an axe kick, and as it lands, he uses it to throw a punch behind it. Actually, there's a movement I really like now, and I train Muay Thai almost every day right now, and it's essentially when you throw a kick and then retract it and sit into the back and throw a hook. And Robert Whitaker landed, I feel like, on Stephen Thompson. I did a breakdown of that years ago, but there was just such beauty in the way the kick comes up, and then as it retracts, the body turns and throws the hook. Maybe it wasn't Stephen Thompson because Stephen beat him, I think, but he might have landed it on Stephen. That's really, sometimes it's how the body is able to move. But sometimes it's just, you know, just perfectly executed things. But yeah, there are so many. And whatever it would be now, in 6 months, there'll be something freakish that people are able to do. All the things that, like, and we talked about this earlier today, the greats, like people that you will admire forever, martial artists that you will admire forever, said, like, Boss is a genius. He's a brilliant man, a wonderful man. And Boss used to say, no jabs in MMA. The jab doesn't work. He used to say that when he was fighting and he was a champion. Jabs don't work in MMA. And then people said head kicks don't work. And then they said spinning techniques don't work. Whatever it is that they say, all of it will work. And in fact, the fact that you don't believe it works makes you even more susceptible to it. But I think we're going to see a lot, and we already are. I mean, it's just because we compartmentalize the way we think about it. And people will say, why doesn't Kung Fu work? It's like, well, first of all, and this is something I talked with John Kavanaugh about a couple of times, traditional martial arts. He'll be like, some of these things are only 1,000 years old. Really? Is that traditional? Meaning, you know, they're pretty new. Like in human history, in our human history, if it's only 1,000 years old, it feels old. But we've been around for many millions of years. It's pretty new. You know, all of these things, and this is all the case. But you just take Tony Ferguson. Tony Ferguson uses shitloads of Chinese martial arts based things, long fist techniques and Wing Chun and stuff like that. You know, like it all, at some point, all of these structures will all not, they have to be taken down the same way that you have to change the language if you want to view something different, not just commentate it different or talk about it different. If you want to see it different, you have to change the language. And if you want to express martial arts different, someone will come along and say that language that everybody, and it won't be the whole thing. Jiu-jitsu won't suddenly not make sense. It won't suddenly all be exploited, but the language will have to change. I've seen coaches, young coaches, in the corner using sort of what is already a limited language. Like they'll talk to their fighter and they'll say, and you know, now bear in mind the camera's on them, so that'll change them. But you'll see a young coach in a corner and he'll say, all right, Steve, we got to get the volume up this round. It's like, what the fuck are you using this limited language for? That's Twitter language. You know, we need to be more of a volume striker. Talk to him in English. You know, talk to him in English. He's got, or you'll hear this. Oh, this fighter's got great volume. What the fuck are you saying? Like, that's not a thing. That's a television term. That's something that's said because we have limitations on time with the way we broadcast. You don't have like, we need to get our volume up. It's like, okay, but you realize every time my hand is here, it's also not here. Every time I do this, I can't be moving away. You know what I mean? It's like that, to suggest that all can be the same, except we should also punch more. then nothing's the same. We've changed everything. It's all interconnected. We can't fight exactly how we are now, but with a higher volume of striking. That's just television jargon. That's not real. So if you start to talk that way, you start to think that way, and now you have flawed thinking, flawed coaching, flawed performance, flawed fighting. The limitations of the language start to shape the way you express the art. It's crazy, but yes, as the language, I mean, and then there are people who their language, when you pop it, like I'll pop in on John Danaher sometimes, and it's like, this motherfucker is thinking, like he's full on thinking. He's taking things, again, that idea that it's like, this guy's a pressure fighter. This guy uses a high volume of strikes to close the distance, a limited guy to put him down and dish out some ground and pound. If we keep saying that, we're not going to think different. Danaher is talking about where they are in space and how the body connects and all of these different things. So as he's thinking, speaking differently, using different language, he's thinking differently, he's seeing things differently. It's more dimensional thinking as you use more language. So I think we'll see that. There'll be somebody come along and literally reinvent the language. And I don't just mean the words of the language, but the language of fighting itself. There's going to be some freaky times, the same way all of a sudden punk rock didn't exist and then it existed. We're going to see things like that happen in the fight game, where just entirely different things happen. If some weird, crazy, super fit motherfucker all of a sudden comes out and starts using a drunken style or a monkey style of kung fu, if he was otherwise educated, really fit, had a high athletic platform, that dude would fuck people up for like a year or two before people started to connect to the dissonance of that style.
Well, that was
right?
like Machida for a while, right? Because back in the day, like everybody said karate doesn't work. Machida comes in and he's doing that like in and out point fighting style. And it took guys several years for them to kind of like figure out how to like counter punch and how to deal with it, because, they were, he would go in there, he would just knock dudes out.
Yeah, for sure. It's and it's a perfect example. And now everyone has a bit of that. Now it's just become part of the overall language. It's become colors in the palette now.
Yep.
Once upon a time, it was like, holy fuck, what is this thing? And now it's just something that everybody knows now. Even if they don't know it and nobody showed them a front kick, guys in their gym do it enough that they have a relationship with it, so it's not freaky anymore. But if everybody's structured, then somebody unstructured can come along and fuck these dudes up for a little while. It won't take long. The dissonance of it and the arrhythmic nature of it and the unpredictability of it will become predictable. I always like this analogy. Imagine we're race car drivers, right? Like we're fucking going, I don't know, 180. I don't know how fast they go. Let's say we're doing 170 miles an hour. We're fucking flying down the stuff. We're moving around and we don't hit each other because we're used to it. If all of a sudden cars started coming towards us, we'd be smashing into shit. But over time, we would actually learn. There would be something in the nature of reading it, or we would change our racing game so we could deal with it. We'd have to go slower at first, but over time we'd go faster. Then we would be able to do that. Then all of a sudden cars start falling down from the sky. It would fuck us up. Everybody would be crashing. But eventually you would learn to understand, to compartmentalize what was happening and read it and anticipate it. And this is what humans do. And that's what's happening. That's what happened in fighting. Everybody was landing spinning attacks for a bit. Now, from today for the next year, you're going to see more people knocked out during spinning attacks than knocking people out with spinning attacks, because they're not unfamiliar. Everybody's doing them. They're in your gym every day. Once upon a time, the Superman punch, I would throw 2 low kicks and then I would fake the low kick and throw a punch. That doesn't fucking, Anthony Pettis changed it up slightly. It had also been left alone for so long, the awareness of it started to atrophy. Why was it left alone? Because it didn't work. It wasn't going to work. Nobody's fucking landing those things for years. So fuck it. We're not even doing it. Well, if we don't do it, it becomes unexpected again. But now, today, would you rather somebody said, you have to throw a Superman punch in this round, or your opponent's going to throw a Superman punch? You'd way rather him have to do it because he's susceptible when he does it. I'll see it and I'll fuck that guy up for throwing it. I'd way rather have it thrown on me than have to throw it, because we all are familiar with it. And this is just what happens. I still am sure that there's going to be guys submitting people from the guard for like a year period. Nobody's doing it, and in MMA gyms, at least, not in pure jiu-jitsu gyms, but in MMA gyms, every sparring partner you spar with is fighting to get back to his feet. And I'm fighting to hold him down. That's the dynamic over and over again, round after round after round, for year after year after year. Nobody's throwing up submissions. They're told you're going to lose in that position. You get beat up in that position. You can't win the round in that position. It's too hard to submit. So nobody's doing it. So nobody's defending submissions for years in MMA gyms. They're just not doing it. It's just not happening. So eventually some bad dudes are going to be, add a few extra layers to the guard that people hadn't seen and haven't been familiar with. Their ability to defend it has atrophied over time, and dudes are going to get submitted from the guard for like 6 months. It's going to be happening again. It might be next week. It might be in 3 months, but it'll happen, for sure.
So there's these trends, these kind of ebbs and flows of certain techniques. Like I think at the beginning it was like wrestling, and then like UFC initially, like, there's jiu-jitsu, and then there was kind of like wrestling and a bunch of stand-up fighters. Then it was like, you had like Chuck Liddell was, beating the shit out of people, and then it went back down to like different. So it's interesting how like, you see these changes in like kind of, not, I don't want to say popularity, but kind of trends, how these trends kind of come and go.
Yeah, and it isn't that different than fashion, or music.
Right.
It really isn't. But and just like those things, it's influenced by many factors. Like fashion or music is influenced by finance and by what can be sold and what people believe can be sold, and so then we'll look for a certain kind of band because we think it's popular. Fighting's the same way. If everybody who's standing up and knocking people out are the ones getting paid and the ones getting promoted and the ones making money, everyone's going to start doing that more.
Gotcha.
Because the finances, the commerce is going to influence the art. And that's nothing to complain about. That's just something to accept. It's always been so. Jazz, painting, poetry, not a lot of rich poets out there today. But if you are in hip hop, you might have a better chance, right? So it would shape. You're a poet. You're naturally a poet. You're not going to write poetry and hope to sell, paper poems anymore. But if you connect with somebody with rhythm and puts beats together and you do hip hop, it can work. So it always shaped. Commerce has always shaped art, and it probably always will. It sucks, but it doesn't suck. I mean, there's a certain amount of acceptance we have to do with things. Any amount of complaining about the real world as it is, if we don't have some intention or ability to change it, we should probably shut up and accept it, because that distraction of complaining and wishing it was different is going to get in the way of accomplishing a lot of the things we want to do in our life. Mm-hmm. Complaining is a rough one because it's inaction disguised as action. Something about complaining makes you feel like you're doing something about it, but you're actually doing nothing but harm yourself. Right? It's not, don't complain. It's not like you don't have the right to complain. But it is harmful and time wasting and distracting, and it makes you negative. If this thing is so, if the company you work for is the way that it is, sitting around with your coworkers complaining about it is literally harming you guys. You either accept the thing and work within it, or truly try to change it, or leave. But any of those are valid options. But hanging around complaining about the reality that will not be changing, whether you complain or not, is not helping. So, so you can complain that commerce influences fighting, but it will. And maybe I have some ability to change it, but probably not.
Yeah, just something to sort of note. You feel like you're, I don't know if you have or not, but you feel like you're in you seem like you're in a different place in a good way than you were last year. The way that you're thinking about things now seems to have changed in the last year and gone down in sort of a deeper path, which I think is cool to see. So thank you.
I feel like that's true. Yeah, I do. Thank you for noticing that, and thank you for saying it. And I do feel like it's true, but it hasn't necessarily been easy. I'm glad that comes across, because it feels like it's true. But it is hard. Like, you have to go and choose to go somewhere else. Again, that path, like, if you choose to do it a different way, you do it with the acceptance that it won't be easy. You could fail, face ridicule and face, like being shunned or be an outcast or there's all kinds of stuff. Unfortunately, if you believe in what you're doing and you're doing it based on truth and what you really believe in. You're adding ideas on ideas, and then hopefully you get somewhere. But I hope to definitely be. I'd like to see you guys in less than a year, because I'm shocked it was that long.
Let's do it again.
But I hope that let's do it again. But
I want to see what you're up to. It'd be cool.
I hope that next time I see you guys, that's true for all of us.
Yeah.
That we're at a even better place. I mean, that's where we'd like to be. It won't always be so. That life is going to throw weird curveballs at you and stuff. But all you can do is try.
Right. Sure. So, Robin, if people want to follow you or get more information, or like, what's your Instagram? And I think you have a website as well.
Yeah, my 1 minute breakdowns, people watch them mostly at Instagram at Robin Black Martial Arts, or Twitter at Robin Black MMA. I'm on Facebook and LinkedIn. I've been hanging out on LinkedIn. It's interesting. People are like, it's like my wife has a vintage clothing business, and I was like, you should definitely be on LinkedIn, because it feels like everybody's at work in a mall, and while they're there, they're like, oh, let's watch some martial arts, or hey, let's buy something. You know what I mean? It's a neat little world. Actually, I never spent any time there. I'm on TikTok. I'm trying to figure out how to make 15-second versions of my breakdowns in such a way that they add some kind of value. That's a bit of a challenge so far.
So just speed it up by like 4 times.
That is one way you could do it. No, that's not crazy. That's not a crazy idea at all. But yeah, it's I'm doing a bunch of stuff for Bellator, and I'm doing some commentary the next couple of weekends. It's good. It's going really good. But I try to literally interact with every single person that reaches out to me. It's very, it's not easy.
That's tough.
But it's tough, but I like it. It's like, I literally think that's a human being somewhere doing something that put that thing down to send me a message saying that they learned something from my breakdown or an idea I had. That's real. That's a real human being. Like, the least I can do is try to get back to them. Mm-hmm. It may be so that if everything keeps growing, that may become impossible one day, but I hope I can keep doing it. I like doing that.
That's awesome. I mean, yeah, like Chewy, you're always so busy too. It's funny, kind of, you were just watching him kind of manage some of that stuff. I feel like I would probably go insane. I couldn't,
It's a lot.
Yeah.
You have to like it. You have to like it. But we were talking about that today. Like, if you're lucky enough to really let yourself decide the things that you like, and you start moving in that direction, the path might change on the way, but at least you're going towards things you enjoy. And you got to be patient too. I mean, shit, you're not going to, whatever the goal you think it is, it's going to take way longer, and it probably will take a new shape. But you're on the path. So,
right.
It's cool.
Yeah, I feel like you're speaking to me sometimes about some of this shit. Because, like, my whole transition to, like, working for myself and doing things like that, it's interesting because you expect yourself to be somewhere maybe further along, and you're not. Mm-hmm. You kind of like start to question, and that's kind of the thing. Mm-hmm. I think the reason why people don't step out of a specific path that they're on to do something they really love is because there's such a realistic amount of failure that can occur. You can really fail and fall flat on your face, right. And sometimes it's hard to be willing to accept that.
But the reality is we can't control the outcome. We can only control the means.
Yeah. And the process, yeah. Mm-hmm. And there's a couple of things that I think help. And one is, I think this is an idea that I see a lot now, and I think people are familiar with, is like, you will fail, and that will be part of any process.
Right.
Like, failure is an important part of process. It also gets a little easier because it's not permanent, and it's not a reflection on you. That means I'm bad, or I suck, or I'm stupid, or it's like, oh, this is a normal part of the process. And then the other thing is, what's the alternative? It's like, I'm going to be in business for myself and pursue something hard in which I might fail, and there's going to be a lot of roadblocks, or I can do something that is more secure. The thing is, that's a trick. The secure company goes out of business. One law gets changed that completely changes your industry. Your boss, God forbid, gets sick. Like, they restructure your thing. Like, the secure businesses are not secure. It's an illusion of security. Once you see that can make you feel scared. You're like, what? Wait, nothing's secure? Yeah. And that's freeing when you're like, oh, wait. being in a state of constant change and uncertainty is a part of life? Yes, it is. We can either pretend it isn't, which we might feel safer, or we can accept that it is and make that become normal. And once that becomes normal, you're like, oh, wait a second. Everybody's living in an uncertainty in a world that's ever changing. Some of them know it and some of them don't, but they all are. Okay, I'm normal. This is normal. The possibility of failure, setback, challenge, fear, these things are all normal. Okay, well then I guess I'll just carry on then, Then once you realize that, it becomes a little easier, I think, too.
Yeah. Failure is normal in some ways, which is, I'm sure everybody.
It's very normal.
Yeah, everybody's failed or, changed their path or their direction, because of possibly failure or, not moving in the direction you want. So.
Yeah, it's good. It's part of it. It's absolutely a part of it. Again, we got to undo some of the programming that, people, the world is different than what we were prepared for. If you're 40, you were trained 36 years ago to expect the world to behave a certain way. It doesn't behave that way. Yeah. And that's okay. And if you're 10 now, what you think the world will look like, I wonder if a 12-year-old just understands just how different the world will be when they're 30. I wonder if they do, because it'll be fucking way different.
There's no way, man. There's no way I think that you have that capacity to even think. Like, you're not 12 years old, man. You're probably like just thinking about, the weekend or.
I mean, think about where we were when we were 12, right? There were CDs, and the internet was like just kind of new, and now we live in this crazy place where we have this sort of altered, sort of half real, half virtual world that we exist in, where the things that you do in the virtual world directly affect the things that happen in the real world, and it's
and vice versa.
Oh my God, it's so bizarre. So it's like there's no way you could have thought about it in that way, like that, like literally, like you're gonna have this thing that they had in Star Trek that you're gonna carry around in your pocket, and you can talk to anyone in the world, and you can do. I mean, it's insane.
Yeah, and now it's normal. I think that's so. I remember when I was a kid, one of the things that was in the future that I could imagine maybe it would happen, but. If it did, it would be so crazy. We'd be looking at a screen and seeing the person you were going to talk to.
Yeah.
Like that was only in movies. In movies, like somebody you would, instead of being on the phone connected to a thing, you could look at a screen and see the person, and it'd be like fucking crazy. And now we're doing that literally right now, and it's normal.
That's something we all do all the time.
Yeah, all the time.
Robin, thank you, man.
It's wild.
I appreciate
Thank you guys.
Appreciate it. This is great. We'll have to do it again. Good luck with your travels. Obviously,
thanks,
that's gonna be you're gonna be going to some cool places. So I'm sure you have some new stories to share.
Yeah, I'm stoked. I will. Stay in touch.
Yeah.
All right, guys. So I hope you enjoyed the podcast. This was probably, I think, one of our longest episodes. But again, it was a lot of fun. It's fun to talk to people that, again, just kind of. Robin, he's a talker anyway. He talks for a living. And so you get guys like that are very good at explaining what's going on through them, because, it's difficult for some people. Some people have a lot of trouble explaining what's going on in their head and everything else. And that was not the case for him. He's able to just let it out. And so I hope you guys enjoyed the conversation. I really enjoyed it. And so, again, if you guys want to support the podcast and keep it going, check out the Patreon at patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu Podcast. And you can also save some money with 15% off of your Charlotte's Web products. I'm getting a little bit of a cough, if you can't tell. My voice is getting a little hoarse, and so I'm having trouble with my words. I'm having trouble with my words.
Your speaking.
My speaking's not so good.
Mine's too. I'm a little hoarse. So,
but you guys,
maybe because we did like a 2-hour podcast.
No, my voice, I was already getting a little hoarse from just coughing and stuff today. The weather's going, it's yo-yoing around right now. Like it warmed up today to like 50 something degrees, and it's been like cold, and so it's doing this stupid stuff. If you guys ever come to Louisville's in the Ohio Valley, which is it's like it has to be like the Super Bowl for like the weather people, because it's like
the Super Bowl.
You know what I mean? Like, because like if you go to like say if you go to California, right? Like say you go to Southern California, like what's the weather guy got to do? Hey, it's sunny. Like I mean, like that's it. Like it's sunny. Maybe there's some clouds. Maybe like the the sky had a mist. It doesn't really rain much, right? So it's sunny. Okay, great. But like Louisville and the Ohio Valley, it's like it might, in any given time of the year, it may snow, rain, sleet. It might be really sunny and warm and be like 90 degrees with humidity or dry. And I mean, it's all over the place. You never can tell. Like our weather throughout the year will go from everything from like, we'll hit like 0 degrees, like Fahrenheit. And then we'll be as hot as like 100 plus Fahrenheit. So I mean it's really wild, the weather changes, and so it wreaks havoc on our bodies sometimes.
It does, and then all the Ohio Valley has all kinds of little nice little things that we breathe in that can cause.
We're stuck in
then help with allergies.
Yeah, we're stuck in a bowl. Like I mean, you're stuck in a big bowl, so all that stuff just sits on it. Yeah,
it's fun. Yeah. So hopefully,
really talking this place up.
It is great. It is cool. Louisville's a cool city, though. It really is. And there's a lot of we've been getting a lot of visitors too.
We have
recently.
We had a lot of visitors. Yeah, we had one. We had two yesterday.
Yeah,
2 today, 2 yesterday.
Oh, really? New ones. And that's cool. Yeah. One guy drove. He was in Indiana, like 2 hours away. I'm sure there's some pretty great gyms in that area, but he drove to hang out with Mr. Chewy.
Yeah. This is sort of preliminary, so if you guys are listening to this, only the most hardcore people are going to be listening at this point. I'm thinking about, so I'm having JT Torres come out to the gym in March. It's kind of like a birthday present for myself.
You're really making this announcement right now?
I'm talking about it. Yeah, so I'm going to have JT Torres come out to my gym and do a seminar because I think he's an amazing grappler, and I love his ability to be a winner, but at the same time, he retains some sort of stoic respect. Like he's not the dude that's out there like, anyway, I have a lot of respect for someone that can do that and still be out there and winning on the biggest stage. So we're going to have him out. And I think what I'm going to do, because a lot of you guys have talked about coming out to the gym, I think I'm going to reserve 20 spots for people that are online fans. So this because what we're going to do is we're going to have a camp that week, like not like a hardcore you're going to get killed training camp, but I was thinking about doing some stuff like jiu-jitsu, some me teaching some stuff, having JT teach some stuff, maybe do a little bit of meditation with people that are interested, whatever, just do some different stuff. But running a camp in March, and I'm going to have it's going to be open to our gym mainly, but I'm going to have 20 spots available for people online. And so if you guys are interested in that sort of thing, just keep your eyes out because I'm going to start putting some announcements out, and it's something I want to do. I think it'll be a lot of fun, and it'll give you guys a chance to come see beautiful Louisville. That's the way we pronounce it here. It's not Louisville. It's Louisville. And come hang out with us and train. So yeah,
it'll be a good time. So, Chewy, with that said, I don't know.
We're finished.
Yeah, we're done.
We're done.
See you guys next time. Bye.